Hi, I'm Prism Raven, and these are the terrifying urban legends of the Philippines. In this video, I will be discussing and illustrating some of I think are the most iconic urban legends of the Philippines. Now, I do not consider myself a very spiritual person or a person who just believes the whimsy of many of these stories, except for one. One of them is actually based on a real story, which we'll get to a bit later. Still, despite my lack of belief in the validity of most of these, I am still a horror fan and I enjoy the many different stories that are scary and peculiar and all that, and I enjoyed making a lot of these. If you want to learn more about them, then I have linked down below in the description some articles and websites that I visited to gather some of the more specific informations on the origins of these stories. Let's begin. The first story is the White Lady of Balete Drive. Now, when we talk about white lady in the Philippines, we don't usually mean white as in race. When people say white lady here, we are more so referring to a ghost that is wearing white clothing. Now, this is a character that is so deeply ingrained into popular culture and folklore in the Philippines that I didn't actually know much about the actual history of it. So, when I was doing my research for it, I actually was shocked about the origins of it and all that. So yeah. It is, like I said, a pretty old story that actually stemmed in the 1950s from a bunch of drivers who were passing by this road called Balete Drive in Quezon City, Metro Manila. There are many different variations of this story, but the basic premise is that there will be this woman in a white dress that has long black hair who is haunting the streets of Balete Drive. Some of the origin stories say that she was killed in this area and was buried near a balete tree which she then possessed. Some of the stories say that she was killed by Japanese soldiers during their occupation of our country. Some of the stories say that it was a cab driver that killed her. And there are even some stories that say that she was driving in this road when she crashed and she died in an accident. There have been many accounts of her haunting Balete Drive, typically asking for a ride home and revealing her scary version of herself when she is in the car in the backseat of the driver's seat, which causes fear and eventually ends up in a lot of accidents in this area. This is known to be a pretty accident-prone road in the Philippines, primarily due to the fear of many drivers passing by it around midnight to 3 a.m. Because of how iconic this character is, there have been many references to this white lady in Filipino media. From the movies named Hiwaga sa Balete Drive, which had two iterations, one in the 50s and one in 1988, and even a movie specifically called White Lady, released in 2006. Another depiction in popular culture is in Drag Race Philippines actually, where in the third season, one of the contestants, Maxi, used the White Lady of Balete Drive as a Snatch Game character, which was really funny. It wasn't on purpose, but I accidentally actually made this version of my illustration very similar to Maxi Andresen's depiction of her in Snatch Game, which is kind of iconic, you know? For these videos where I have a central theme, I also try to have a central visual nugget, a visual cue that appears in all of these illustrations to tie them together. For the Nightmares video, I added stripes into all of the nightmare sequences, which was really cool. For this one, I didn't really have that much of an idea in the first illustration, but I ended up making everything very colorful. That's the thing. I love it when horror is colorful. In movies like The Substance, I love the dichotomy of the very horrifying imagery paired with colorful sets, backgrounds, and characters. And I ended up incorporating that into the illustrations I made of these urban legends. For this one, I focus on the color purple, with a lighting scheme that is sort of replicating flash photography. I imagine this is kind of what she would look like if she was transforming into her horrifying version of herself and she was caught in flash photography, you know? It was really fun playing around with different textures. This one is very rendery and very heavy on painterly textures. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I just made her have this scary expression on with her claws and her iconic white gown and iconic long black hair. Yeah, this was really fun. At first, I made it a tall image, a vertical image, but after making all of the other ones, I noticed that they were all landscape except for this one. So I ended up making a wider version of it by expanding it, like zooming it in and filling in some of the sides. And yeah, this is the final image. Next. The next urban legend is the snake monster in Robinson's Galleria. Robinson's Galleria is an iconic mall in the Philippines, also located in Quezon City. It is a 5-level shopping mall with various shops, dining outlets, and entertainment facilities. It opened in January of 1990, and in that decade, it spawned the urban legend of the snake monster. Rumor has it that the then president and COO of Robinson's Retail, Robina Gokongwei, had apparently a twin sister that was half snake, and this creature/monster was cannibalistic in nature and fed on humans. Now, of course, there are also many different versions of this story, but the general gist is that this twin sister is actually a fortune bringer to the family of the Gokongweis. Some say that she is a lucky charm of sorts, and some versions say that she lays golden eggs for the family to make them rich. You get what I mean. The premise is that she is both horrifying and extremely beneficial to the wealth of their family. According to this rumor, the family placed this creature in the basement of the mall, where it would feed on customers that would go missing, typically from dressing rooms. From my sources about this urban legend, I've read a lot of stories about Alice Dixon, who is a very popular it girl of sorts in the 90s in the Philippines. Allegedly, this actress escaped an attack from this creature and was allegedly paid off to be silent about her experience. This was highly regarded to be an urban legend up until it gained popularity in the 2010s because of a YouTube video claiming to have depicted this creature and circulating it online. In 2008, the family actually denied this entire urban legend and claimed that the story only emerged from their competition, trying to discredit their name and provide negative press around their malls, which I honestly think is the more plausible explanation to this whole ordeal. Even the actress Alice Dixon decided to come out and make multiple statements about this, appearing in a 2018 ad for Robinson's Galleria and even making a YouTube video addressing the rumors in 2020. Because of how widespread and iconic this urban legend is, it was actually featured in Shake, Rattle, and Roll. If you don't know, Shake, Rattle, and Roll is a very popular horror anthology film series in the Philippines. Basically, each movie has 3 different stories, narrating urban legends, myth, and folklore, and in one of the scenes depicting this monster, Mele Cantiveros in that one scene, she was basically in this mall where one of the employees caught her stealing some of the clothes and redirected her to this hidden dressing room in the department store where she was trying on clothes and hiding them to steal them. The employees locked the door, and the dressing room actually turned out to be a secret elevator which led to the basement where this monster is hiding, waiting to feed on this thief. In one of those scenes, the mirror in the dressing room was depicted to be a two-way mirror of sorts, and I really wanted to depict that in this illustration, with the mirror showing off this man's reflection as well as the silhouette of the monster behind it. It was honestly very challenging to pull this off and not make it look weird. It was really fun. It was also my first time ever painting a full-on snake, so I had multiple attempts that were not successful before I landed on this one. It's my usual process with blocking in an initial rough sketch, cleaning it up, and adding some base colors and then lighting it. It's actually quite similar to the process I did with my layers video. If you haven't watched it, here it is, where I started off with the shading with the lighting first before I moved on to the local colors. I hate drawing things in perspective, so if this looks a little off, then forgive me. Yeah, for this one, I focused more on the green color of everything to, represent the more snaky, reptilian thing that we have going on in this story. Many media depictions of this character depicted her as more of a humanoid creature in some transformation scenes, but I opted for a more literal snake appearance just for clarity purposes. I don't think I'm very experienced yet with character design, so I don't think I would have been able to pull off a more humanoid half creature design. So yeah, this is really fun to make and I love the lighting. Next. Now, the past 2 ones I would consider really just urban legends and not really based on much factual evidence. The third one is a little different because it is based on a real story. Now, for my non-Filipino viewers, which a lot of you are American, I see in my analytics, as a brief summary of Filipino history, during December 30th, 1965 up until February 25th of 1986, the President of the Philippines was Ferdinand Marcos Sr., and his presidency marked a very dark time in Filipino history. He is, I would say, one of the most insane dictators in recent history, leading with a violent authoritarian rule, embezzling billions of pesos of funds from the Philippines, enforcing a strict violent martial law, torturing and killing many political activists, and causing so much death and suffering in the country for many years during his presidency. Now eventually, the people of the Philippines decided to riot, with hundreds of thousands of Filipinos filling up the Epifanio de los Santos Avenue from February 22 to 25th of 1986. These protests fueled the resistance against Ferdinand Marcos and eventually led to him and his families and supporters fleeing to exile in Hawaii. During his reign of terror, there were many violent acts of dictatorship enacted upon the Filipino citizens, one of which was the tragic construction of the Manila Film Center. Prior to the existence of this film center, the Philippines did not have a national film archives, which was said to have been the reason as to why Imelda Marcos, the wife of Ferdinand Marcos and First Lady of the Philippines, spearheaded the building of this establishment. This building was apparently very rushed, with the lobby being finished in 72 hours instead of the supposed 6 weeks of construction time. This rushed pace of construction eventually led to the neglect of various precautionary measures to maintain the safety of construction workers, which led to the collapse of scaffolding structures, trapping many construction workers under rubble and drying cement. Now, until today, there are still many debates on how many people passed away and were affected during this event, and with every crime that they've committed and their efforts to strangle the media outlets to maintain this pristine image to the public, it wouldn't be that shocking for them to also cover up this whole ordeal. Immediately after the collapse happened, a blanket security and a media blackout were imposed by the Marcos family to prevent the spread of news in their fear of creating another scandal. According to different articles, no rescuers and ambulances were allowed in until an official statement was prepared. Apparently, rescuers were only allowed after 9 hours, which was, of course, too late by then. Allegedly, it was around 168 workers that were killed and buried in the cement, never to be retrieved again. Official reports say that only 7 people died, falling into the concrete and eventually being retrieved as dead bodies. Of course, with the amount of control that the Marcoses have on media coverage and people during that time, people find it quite unlikely that only 7 people actually died, and many believe that the death toll was much higher than that, reaching, like I said, around 168 people. And many of the urban legends state that because of how rushed the construction deadline was, they didn't really have time to retrieve many of the bodies. And many of these dead bodies were eventually just buried in cement, with the protruding limbs hacked off and covered in cement, causing many ghost stories about these allegedly buried construction workers haunting this establishment. It's really hard to tell what actually happened due to the media outage as well as the many loyalists surrounding this family. Now, whether you believe that there were bodies left buried under this building or not, there's a certain eeriness and sadness in the tragedy that actually happened that was actually proven, which is that people died while building this establishment. Many people who visit this building say that they feel a sense of dread and sadness and creepiness whenever visiting the area, potentially because of the many spirits of the people who died there during the incident. The Marcoses truly got away with doing so much evil and harm to the country, and until today there are still billions of pesos of unpaid taxes from them. Justice hasn't really been served to the people who were affected not only by this event but also the many tortures and murders that happened during their time. And the worst part of it is that the current president of the Philippines is the son of Ferdinand Marcos. Crazy. And people wonder why this country is absolute garbage. For this illustration, I really wanted to reference the ill-gotten wealth of the Marcoses, specifically the massive shoe collection by Imelda Marcos. I was actually researching the different shoes that she had. Maybe I could use one of them as references for this shoe illustration that I'm doing, but they were all kind of ugly. So I ended up scrapping that and just going for a bloody red shoe, just to symbolize the murderous nature of their reign of terror in the Philippines. And I wanted spirit hands emerging from the concrete and grabbing this shoe. This was actually quite difficult. I don't know why. It's quite simple, but I guess I'm just not that experienced with drawing feet and drawing shoes. But yeah. This whole event is such a great reminder of the violence of politics. I feel like nowadays there's a lot of resistance to the discussion of political events and history and all that, and this is, I guess, just my reminder to everybody that there is a lot of bloodshed and violence in politics, and we must never succumb to the belief that politics is something we can just agree to disagree with, that things are subjective when, a lot of it can be proven in recent history. We have documentation of things happening, especially with the election of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. That was kind of a crazy thing to witness, the active discrediting of recent history. The people who are not keen on learning history are the ones who are bound to repeat it, and I feel like we are seeing that with the Filipino people. So many people did not bother to learn the ins and outs of our history, and it shows with the results of the election and everything that is happening right now as a consequence of that. It's just really sad. I guess it just goes to show that the real horrors of the world aren't the supernatural beings. They are the ones that are walking amongst us. In our families, in our communities, the people in politics. They are the true monsters that walk amongst us. And they are the ones we should be afraid of. I guess that wraps it up for this video. I'm sorry this took quite a while to put out. Some things came up and I eventually had to do this a bit later. I hope you learned something from this, not only about Filipino culture and urban legends, but also the importance of history. I guess pivoting the topic to a more lighthearted tone. I recently made a video discussing the importance of using a single brush for painting. If you want to check that out, you can click here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.